Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Serena Hill-LaRoche, and I'm Assistant Professor of Voice at the University of South Carolina School of Music. And I'm also the Mid-Atlantic Regional Governor-elect and President of the South Carolina Nats chapter. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to be able to introduce our presenters today. Dr. Laura Kafka-Price. In addition to being an active singer and teacher of singing, has presented lecture recitals, pre-concert lectures, and other presentations on Polish music at several regional, national, and international professional music conferences, including the International College Music Society Conference in Berlin, Germany, American Musicological Society, and to various Nats conferences. She's being joined today by her co-presenter, Maksymilian Krzak, and they wrote a book together on how to sing in Polish, hoping to make the performance of Polish vocal repertoire more accessible to non-Polish singers. Their book is advancing through the review process, and we're very excited to have them with us today. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Laura Kafka-Price and Maksymilian Krzak.
Hello, dzień dobry. My name is Laura Kafka-Price.
And my name is Maksymilian Krzak.
Welcome to our presentation on Polish lyric diction. It's a great pleasure to be with our colleagues at the National Association of Teachers of Singing Mid-Atlantic Conference and Auditions being held at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. Max and I just wrote a book on Polish lyric diction, and it's currently advancing through the peer review process with a major publisher. The idea of our project is to promote Polish music and language in the United States. It was developing in my mind for many years. I was born and raised in the United States in a Polish home, which is why I speak and perform in Polish. There are thousands of beautiful Polish songs and arias composed over the centuries that unfortunately are not performed very often outside of Poland. As it is not one of the mainstream languages learned by singers, Polish at first may seem intimidating due to its consonant clusters, but it is easier than it appears. However, should you perceive Polish as a bit intimidating, we hope to change your mind today. The great benefit of learning to pronounce Polish is the treasure trove of Polish vocal repertoire. In addition to Karol Szymanowski, on whose music I wrote a doctoral dissertation, there are compositions by Fryderyk Chopin, Stanisław Moniuszko, Grażyna Bacewicz, Henryk Górecki, Witold Lutosławski, Marta Ptaszyńska, among many others. Polish vocal repertoire also includes a large number of folk and patriotic songs. All of these deserve even greater exposure. Not only are the songs beautiful, representing the highest level of artistic compositional standards, but they are also teaching vehicles, excellent for refining singing technique. There is a song for every voice type and level of experience.
Polish is not as hard as one might think. Even though the language may visually appear intimidating, singers are probably familiar with most Polish consonants and vowels that they know from other languages, like Italian, German, or even English. There are only a few sounds specific to Polish that we will talk about today. Additionally, the famous Polish consonant clusters are much easier when you know how to decipher the digraphs, because it is not true that we pronounce every letter that we see. We will do a screen share with you now, and we will start with a few general facts about Polish. Polish utilizes the Latin alphabet with a few additional characters specific to Polish, and those special characters also consist of the letters of the Latin alphabet with diacritical marks, either above them, beneath them, or going through them. Polish does not utilize articles, so any single letter word that you encounter singing Polish arias or songs are not articles, but prepositions. And unlike English, Polish uses declensions that indicate correlation between 7 grammatical cases. And therefore, Polish uses fewer prepositions than English.
You'll encounter the word się as part of the construction of a reflexive verb, and it's used for all grammatical persons, singular and plural. Się by itself doesn't have meaning. For example, bać się, to fear or to be afraid. Polish utilizes grammatical gender, which means that nouns are either masculine, feminine, or neuter, as in German. And other parts of speech, such as adjectives, pronouns, or verbs, must agree with the gender of the nouns that they relate to. And regarding stress, it falls on the penultimate syllable, except for the plural forms of verbs in past tense and certain words of foreign origin.
Just like English, Polish utilizes digraphs, which are groups of 2 successive letters that make one sound. And there are 7 digraphs in Polish. The first digraph on the list consists of letters C and H. It is pronounced exactly the same way as we would pronounce H, letter H, by itself. It's pronounced H. An example of that sound in English we can find in a word like horse. And the Polish word in that example is pronounced chata. The next digraph consists of letters C and Z, and it can be found in English words such as chamber or chocolate. And the Polish word is pronounced czemu. Next, we have a digraph consisting of letters D and Z. A very close sound to the Polish digraph Z can be found in an English word beads. The Polish word in that example is pronounced as wiedza. The next example is a digraph consisting of letters D and Z, but this time Z has an acute accent mark above it. This sound doesn't really occur in English, and it's pronounced as G. The word in that example is pronounced as dźwięk. The next example starts again with the letter D. This time Z has not an acute accent mark, but it's a dot above it, and it's pronounced as J. We can find it in English words such as jam or jazz, and actually the Polish word for jam is dżem. The next digraph is built of letters R and Z. We can find it in English in words such as vision or genre. And the Polish word in that example is pronounced rzeka. And the last example is a digraph consisting of letters S and Z. In English, we find it in words such as shadow or shallow. And the Polish word is pronounced as szafa. I mentioned special characters in Polish a few minutes ago, and Laura will tell you about the first group of those characters.
Let's look at the Polish L with a slash through it. L. An example of that word in Polish would be pronounced ławka. Then we have an acute accent over the letter O, pronounced as U, the same as the letter U. An example in Polish for the word mówi. And then we have a Z with the overdot, zh. It's pronounced exactly like the digraph that Max told you about, zh. Example would be może.
The next group of special Polish characters is classified as palatal consonants. When pronouncing these consonants, the middle of the tongue comes in contact with the hard palate. The first word in that example, and the word in the first example, the C with the acute accent mark, is pronounced znać. Then we have letter N with the accent mark. And we can find that sound in English words such as neither. It's very similar. And the Polish word is pronounced as koń. We also have S with the accent mark. And that sound is pronounced as sh. The Polish word would be pronounced śpiewam. And the last example is the letter Z with the accent mark. It's pronounced as ź. And the Polish word would be pronounced as źródło. It's important to know that if any of these palatal consonants are followed by a vowel, the acute accent mark is replaced by the vowel E in the spelling of the word. For example, nie or ciemno. So in the spelling of Polish words, there would never be a letter with an acute accent mark and a vowel following it. It is also very important to know that the palatal sounds that we just talked about are not the same sounds as post-alveolar consonants that we know in English. The difference is when pronouncing the post-alveolar consonants like ch, j, or sh, the tip of the tongue is touching the alveolar ridge. When pronouncing Polish palatal sounds, all of those letters with accent marks above them, the tip of the tongue is at the lower front teeth. And to feel that difference, perhaps we could say together these two words in those two examples, making sure that for the second word, the tip of the tongue is touching the lower front teeth. Try saying szafa and then ściano.
In addition to oral vowels, Polish also utilizes two nasal vowels represented by the graphemes, the E with the cedilla beneath it and an A with the cedilla beneath it. These vowels are often compared to French nasal vowels, and in some publications, they are represented by the same IPA symbols. The ones you're familiar with, the backwards 3 with a tilde above it, as in the French word vin, and the backwards C with a tilde above it, as in the French word bon. However, it must be noted that Polish nasal vowels are not exactly the same sound as in French. One of my duties at the Peabody Institute is to teach French to our conservatory students. And during the pandemic, we started using such words as synchronous and asynchronous. We can apply those to comparing French and Polish nasal vowels. So the Polish un and on are briefly begin without a nasal, with the nasal added after the vowel begins. So we can say that the production of Polish nasal vowels is asynchronous. Whereas French nasal vowels are synchronous with the onset of the vowel. As you can see in our screen share, instead of the French IPA symbols for and on, we prefer these symbols that you see. These are commonly used by Polish linguists. These symbols are a good visual representation of how the Polish nasal vowels are produced, reminding singers that they start briefly with an oral articulation, which is a crucial difference between them and the French nasal vowels. That being said, when producing Polish nasal vowels, the nasal resonance should be added quickly. It is important not to spend too much time on the brief oral beginning of the vowel, as this would lead to creating an additional syllable. In a little while, you'll hear a recording of my singing a song that has the word leçon in it. On the other hand, should either nasal vowel fall on a long note, singers should sing the note on the oral vowel and then add the nasal resonance at the very end. So, for example, if you had a short note for leçon, you could sing leçon. Or if you had a longer note, leçon, like that.
The most common mistake, even among Polish native speakers, is to involve the lips by rounding or completely closing them when producing the nasal vowels. And this results in replacing the nasal resonance with the labial sounds w or m. So if I were to pronounce the word twoją, which means yours, it's important to make sure that my lips are not involved in producing the vowel. Even in Poland, you could hear a lot of people pronouncing that word as twojom or twoją, which is incorrect. Another thing to remember about Polish nasal vowels and their pronunciation is that L is never nasalized in word ending position. There are only a few cases when it should be nasalized, and these are grammatical reasons, but they rarely occur, almost never. On the other hand, on is always nasalized in word ending position. On the screen, we see just a few reminders, things that we should remember when pronouncing nasal vowels. So just to summarize everything that we've said so far, Polish vowels are different from the French nasal vowels in that Polish nasal vowels are asynchronous, which means that they start briefly with an oral articulation and the nasal resonance is added promptly. We're not supposed to nasalize L in word ending position unless there is a grammatical reason for it. And we always nasalize on in word ending position. We should also always make sure to never end the vowel with rounded and or closed lips when pronouncing Polish nasal vowels. Depending on the adjacent letters, the nasal resonance in nasal vowels sometimes takes on a different form. In the first example that sounds as pająk, when pronouncing the nasal vowel on, because of the following K, the nasal resonance turns into a ring N. In the other example, tempy, the nasal resonance turns into consonant M because our lips are getting close to pronounce the letter P. This usually is taken care of when pronouncing the word.
Polish speech for the stage, or wymowa sceniczna, is the highest standard for the pronunciation of Poland, for the pronunciation of Polish. the model pronunciation of the language for the stage. And I'd like to share with you a quote from Małgorzata Nabiałek, who writes, "Stage speech is an, quote, obligatory set of rules that defines the correct joining of articulated phonemes and words when one is performing on theater and music stages," end quote.
And it is important to know that not every native Polish speaker is familiar with the rules of speech for this stage. I myself had no idea that this was a thing until I was, I believe, 19 when I went to college to study voice. So as helpful as it might be to listen to Polish native speakers, to get the feel for the language, singers should be careful not to mimic everything they hear. And just like in every other country, there are differences in how Poles speak depending on various regions of the country. And these regionalisms and dialects are not included in the speech for this stage. There is no room for them on this stage. There are certain aspects of Polish speech for this stage that we would like to familiarize you with. And Laura will tell you a little bit about assimilation of consonants in Polish.
Consonants assimilate to one another. For example, G, as in the word good or great, can be pronounced as K, as in the word cat, if the following or preceding phoneme is unvoiced. So as you see on our chart here, we have, for example, the Polish B turning into a P. We're familiar with voicing and devoicing of consonants, and Ds can turn into Ts, and so on and so forth. So we have an example of the Polish word rzeka. And then we have Max's last name, which is pronounced Krzak because of the beginning unvoiced phoneme K. Then we have my name, Kafka. When we go the other direction, it's followed, the W is followed by a unvoiced phoneme. This is the original spelling of my last name when my parents immigrated to the United States with my brother following the atrocities of World War II. And so in any case, their name was spelled K-A-W-K-A, and then it was spelled phonetically when they immigrated, and it is now spelled K-A-F-K-A. Then we have a word in isolation with an ending B. So instead of pronouncing that B as a B, it turns into an unvoiced phoneme P. So we have the Polish word skarb. Oh, and we can also say a word about the Polish R. It's fun and easy, hopefully for most people. And if you can make that sound, then flip it 2 or 3 times against the alveolar ridge. Skarb.
Another aspect of Polish speech for this stage that singers should be familiar with is rearticulation of double consonants. When 2 identical phonemes occur next to each other within a word, sonorous and fricative consonants should be elongated, just like in Italian. However, all the other double consonants need to be rearticulated. So the first example that you see on the screen, this is a Polish word, panna. And because N is a sonorous consonant, these 2 consonants should not be rearticulated, but elongated. So again, the word is pronounced panna. The second example we have two Ds occurring next to each other, plosive dental consonants. And because they're not fricative, nor are they sonorous consonants, we are supposed to rearticulate these two and pronounce the word as oddech. Oddech. They should be rearticulated quickly without inserting a shadow vowel between them. On the other hand, across words, when two identical phonemes occur across two words, they all need to be rearticulated, regardless if they're sonorous, fricative consonants, or any other kind of consonants. So these two words that you see at the bottom of the screen, they are pronounced as panenash. And it sounds similar to the first example, panna. And if the last example, panenash, if this was one word, that N would be elongated. But because one N belongs to the first word and the other one belongs to the second word, we need to rearticulate them and pronounce these two words as panenash. And just like we are rearticulating all double consonants across words, the same is true for vowels. In Polish speech for this stage, a glottal stop needs to occur when pronouncing words beginning with a vowel, whether the preceding word ends with a consonant or a vowel. In the first example, we have two vowels across two words, and these two words would be pronounced as na ulicy. And as you can probably hear, the second word starts with a new attack, with a glottal stop. Na ulicy. If the first word ends with a consonant, we also need to insert a glottal stop before starting to pronounce the second word. So in the second example, we would say Naród ukraiński. Naród ukraiński. Even though the first word, as you can see, ends with a D, in the spelling of the word, there is a D at the end of it. If the following word begins with a vowel, that D and any other consonant is supposed to be kept unvoiced. And for that reason, we say Naród ukraiński. There is an exception, however, if the first word is a preposition, that consonant, the last consonant in that preposition, needs to remain voiced. And we can see this in the last example on the screen. We would pronounce these two words as nad ulem. I'm going to say these two examples, second and third example, one after another again, and perhaps you can hear the difference in the two Ds that we can see in the spelling. One of them, the first one will be unvoiced and the second one will be voiced. Naród ukraiński. Nad ulem. When there are two vowels occurring next to each other within a word, they should be pronounced seamlessly, and we are not supposed to insert a glottal stop. So the word ocean, which as you can see means ocean, and it's spelled exactly the same way. When pronouncing the word ocean, we need to go from the vowel e to a without inserting glottal stop. Ocean.
You'll hear this word in the song that you'll hear in a few minutes by Karol Szymanowski. All right, and we now come to a summary of the most important aspects of Polish speech for the stage.
When pronouncing nasal vowels, we are supposed to always nasalize on in word-ending position and never nasalize on in word-ending position, unless there is a grammatical reason for it. But as I said earlier, that almost never happens. There are only a few cases for that. So I think it's safe to say that it's better to never nasalize on in word-ending position. When there are two identical phonemes occurring across two words, we are always supposed to rearticulate those. When two identical phonemes occur next to each other within a word, fricatives and sonorous consonants should be elongated, while affricates and plosive consonants are rearticulated.
When there are two vowels across words, a glottal stop should occur. Two consecutive vowels within a word should be pronounced seamlessly. Remember to articulate the difference between post-alveolar and palatal consonants. For the latter, the tip of the tongue is placed behind the lower teeth. Keep your articulators very active when singing Polish consonants and move through them as quickly yet as clearly as possible. Now we've come to the point in our presentation when we can hear some music. So it's our pleasure to share two songs with you. The first will be Karol Szymanowski's Kot from Rymy Dziecięce, his Opus 49 song cycle, to a poem by Kazimiera Iłakowiczówna. You're going to hear me singing this song, and the pianist for this recording is Dr. Tomasz Robak. And it's all about a cat who has had an argument with man and is living on an island. And he waits for visitors to come and just looks out at the water. Max is going to point out a couple of things to listen for in the song, and we've highlighted these in bold and in red, and you'll see them on the screen.
Yes, so they are in bold and in red, just a few cases when there are two vowels occurring next to each other and you can hear Laura pronouncing them without inserting a glottal stop. We can hear a few consonants, identical consonants being rearticulated, and you will hear Laura pronouncing, beautifully pronouncing Polish nasal vowels, or not pronouncing the nasal for "on" in word-ending position.
Well, thank you, Max. The second song will be by Ludomir Różycki, a wonderful song called Rajski Ptak, I should say another wonderful song, to a poem by Julian Krzewiński. This is a song about a bird of paradise who has flown from its golden cage. I think you'll find it a bit reminiscent in the style of Puccini. So lighter voices like mine can sing this and really feel like we're being very syrupy. And the pianist for this recording is Eileen Cornett, my colleague at Peabody. Or I should say our colleague at Peabody.
Śpiew
Well, dziękujemy. Max and I hope that you enjoyed those two gorgeous gems from the Polish repertoire. Before we leave you today, we'd like to offer some suggested Polish repertoire so you can begin your journey with Polish songs. A few pieśni. First, a female Polish composer, probably Poland's most famous Polish female composer, Grażyna Bacewicz. Although she was primarily an instrumental composer, she has, I believe it's 12 songs for voice and piano. Wonderful songs, and even 2 humorous ones among those. Fryderyk Chopin has 19 songs for voice and piano, and there is now a new national edition available. Despite what you may think of the intricacies and complications of Chopin's piano music, the piano accompaniments are surprisingly accessible and in some cases uncomplicated in many cases. And some of the songs are hauntingly beautiful. My former professor from early college days, Dr. Sal Ferrantelli, composed a song for me, Szklana Góra, to a poem by Lydia Kosk for voice and piano. Szklana Góra means glass mountain. And it was my pleasure to premiere that a few years ago in Washington, D.C. Henryk Górecki has his Symphony No. 3, the Symphony of Sorrowful Songs, Symphonia Pieśni Żałosnych, for soprano solo and orchestra. Quite a famous piece and frequently performed very beautiful soprano solos. Mieczysław Karłowicz and his 20 songs for voice and piano. Again, just not a large number of them, but incredibly beautiful songs. Poland's great opera composer Stanisław Moniuszko, with so many songs for voice and piano in 5 volumes. Ignacy Jan Paderewski, songs for voice and piano. Of course, Paderewski was one of Poland's former prime ministers, great statesman and pianist. And of course, there are composers such as Karol Szymanowski, whom I already mentioned, Witold Lutosławski, Krzysztof Penderecki, Ludomir Różycki, Maria Szymanowska, Marta Ptaszyńska, and others. The song that you heard me sing, Kot, from Szymanowski's Rymy Dziecięce, is the nucleus of our book on Polish lyric diction, where we draw examples from all 20 songs in our book to cite pronunciations of Polish. We hope that you'll contact us if you'd like to begin your journey with Polish repertoire. And we certainly look forward to hearing from you. It would be a great pleasure. And I hope you'll visit our website, Sing in Polish. We are building it and excited about it. And lastly, I'd like to mention my wonderful colleague, Dr. Deborah Thurlow, who is my go-to person when I need to find repertoire in the United States of Polish music. And 2 opportunities, one a vocal competition and one a scholarship. The vocal competition and the scholarship are for individuals of Polish heritage, but I certainly urge you to look into these on the websites there, and we can answer some questions about those too. Dziękujemy.
Dziękujemy. Thank you.